The difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees Celsius means drastically different futures for our planet.
Does half a degree of warming really matter that much? You know, think about it for a second. Half a degree Celsius. If the weather changed by that much today, you probably wouldn't even notice. It sounds like almost nothing, doesn't it? But here's the thing. When you take that tiny number and apply it to the whole planet, the entire climate system, well, the stakes get incredibly high. That half a degree suddenly becomes this critical dividing line between a future we can probably handle and one where things start breaking for good. So first, let's just tackle the biggest misunderstanding about that half a degree. Why is it such a huge deal for the planet when it feels so small to us? Okay, the key thing to get is the difference between weather and climate. Your local weather, it can swing 10, even 20 degrees in a single day. That's totally normal. But the global average temperature, that's different. That's like the planet's core energy setting. Even a tiny little nudge up in that average means a truly mind-boggling amount of extra heat is being trapped and sloshed around our oceans, our land, and our air. Here's a really good way to think about it. Your body runs at about 37 degrees Celsius, right? If your temperature goes up by just half a degree, you've got a fever. It's your body's alarm bell screaming that something is wrong, that the system is out of whack. And that's exactly what this half a degree is for the Earth. It's a planetary fever. So to really see what's at stake, let's do a side-by-side. What does a 1.5 degree world look like versus a 2 degree world? We're going to break it down into 3 key areas. First, extreme weather. Then our planet's ecosystems. And finally, what it all means for people, the human cost. All right, first up, a world of extremes. This is where you really see how that extra half degree acts like someone grabbing the volume knob on dangerous weather and cranking it way, way up. And hey, don't just take my word for it. This comes straight from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. They couldn't be more clear. Their report basically says that a 2 degree world will have more frequent, more intense heat extremes everywhere than a 1.5 degree world. Now, this slide is where it gets really stark. Look at these numbers. At 1.5 degrees of warming, about 14% of us will get hit with a severe heat wave at least once every 5 years. But look at that jump to 2 degrees. It more than doubles to almost 37% of the entire global population. So let's turn that percentage into actual people. What does that mean? It means holding the line at 1.5 degrees protects about 420 million people from those dangerous heat waves. That's a staggering number of human beings affected by that little half a degree. So we've seen how it amps up the weather, but it doesn't stop there. What about the natural world? Well, for a lot of ecosystems, that extra half a degree isn't just a slightly bigger problem. It's a tipping point, a point of no return. And if you want a perfect, heartbreaking example of a tipping point, just look at coral reefs. At 1.5 degrees, we are projected to lose 70 to 90% of them. I mean, that's already a catastrophe. But at 2 degrees, we lose more than 99%. It's the difference between a few survivors clinging on and total wipeout. The IPCC's wording on this is just chillingly direct. They say that at 2 degrees of warming, coral-dominated ecosystems will be non-existent, period. There's no wiggle room in that statement. The door for their survival slams shut somewhere in that half-degree gap. And it's a very similar story up in the Arctic. At 1.5 degrees, an ice-free summer is a super rare, once-a-century kind of event. But bump it to 2 degrees, and suddenly it's happening once every 10 years. That's a tenfold increase. A change that fundamental to the Arctic completely rewrites weather patterns for the rest of us. And of course, all of this circles right back to us. This brings us to the most direct impacts of all, the human cost. Let's translate all this climate science into what it actually means for the basics: our food, our water, and our health. Let's start with water. The science on this is pretty amazing. If we can just hold the line at 1.5 degrees, we could cut the number of people facing serious water shortages by up to half. That is a massive, massive difference in human well-being. And you know, where water gets scarce, food scarcity is never far behind. At 2 degrees of warming, scientists are projecting major hits to food availability in all these key regions you see here. We're not just talking about slightly less food, we're talking about a real danger of instability and hunger for millions. And finally, our health. Look, any warming is bad for public health, but that extra half a degree seriously raises the stakes. We're talking more heat stroke and death, diseases like malaria and dengue spreading to new places, and a greater risk of malnutrition because of those food shortages. This chart from the IPCC, it basically pulls everything together in one powerful image. They call it reasons for concern. Just follow the colors from left to right as the temperature goes up. You can literally see the risk level for things like extreme weather and ecosystems jump from high, that's the red, to very high, that's the purple, right in that crucial zone between 1.5 and 2 degrees. It's like a visual warning bell. So when you boil it all down, here's the deal. We're not just looking at a number on a chart. We are looking at a choice between two completely different futures. So when we ask what that half a degree really means, it's the difference between some coral reefs surviving versus near total extinction, the difference between an ice-free Arctic being a once-in-a-lifetime shock or a regular part of summer, and the difference in protecting hundreds of millions of people from deadly heat. The evidence is just overwhelming. Half a degree is not some tiny detail. It's a firewall. It's the line in the sand between a future with really tough challenges and a future with catastrophic changes that we can't undo for the planet and for all of us. The science has shown us with incredible clarity what's down each of these two paths. It's laid out the consequences. So the only real question left is the one science can't answer for us. Which future are we going to choose?